Rise, Meg.
The Force will be with you.
Hello my dear friends and welcome back to another video. In today's video we have some really exciting new details surrounding Boba Fett and the implications that will have on the Book of Boba Fett. We'll also be speaking about Pedro Pascal and more. So before I dive into the news, please may I ask you to hit like down below, subscribe to my channel if you're brand new and a huge welcome if you are. And please be sure to give that notification bell a good old tickle to be alerted each and every time I post new content to the channel. So without any more jibber jabber, let's dive into it. So as you guys know, in December of this year, we're going to get the Mandalorian spin-off, which is called the Book of Boba Fett. But in addition to this series, he's also getting a new comic, which is going to be called War of the Bounty Hunters, and it's going to explore what happened between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. So the official description notes, War of the Bounty Hunters is an upcoming comic series that will tell the story of Boba Fett after having left Cloud City with Han Solo frozen in carbonite and before landing in the palace of Jabba the Hutt on Tatooine. So while admittedly this is a really big piece of news, it's actually the implications of this comic series which are really exciting, specifically in regards to the Book of Boba Fett, and Inverse have written a really good article about this. So they state this epic new Star Wars comic could solve a huge Book of Boba Fett mystery. They write, who was Boba Fett working for during the original Star Wars trilogy? Was he being paid by Darth Vader, Jabba the Hutt, or was he double dipping? A new comic book miniseries will bravely reopen a complicated can of Star Wars canon and delve into Fett's various allegiances and hopefully fill in the strange question of the famous bounty hunter's employment status throughout the original trilogy. War of the Bounty Hunters will almost certainly answer the question of Boba Fett's employment and in the process set up the Book of Boba Fett. And I completely agree with Inverse here. I think the reason they're releasing this a few months before the Book of Boba Fett is to give a little backstory and flesh out Boba Fett's story arc. Announced on StarWars.com, War of the Bounty Hunters is a 5-part series that will span several ongoing Star Wars comic book titles, including Dr. Aphra, Darth Vader, Bounty Hunters, and the ongoing post-Empire Strikes Back series 2. So as I stated before, the concept is to map the journey between Cloud City and Jabba's palace on Tatooine. Everyone knows that Boba Fett took Han Solo's frozen body of carbonite straight to Tatooine after he left Bespin, but what this comic book miniseries presupposes is maybe he didn't. So this is what the writer Charles Soule has to say about it. Boba Fett is in possession of Han Solo at the end of episode 5, and at the beginning of War of the Bounty Hunters he's not. Did Bib Fortuna try to cheat Boba Fett, and if so, why? The purpose of War of the Bounty Hunters is in theory to demonstrate that a lot of people have an interest in snagging Fett's cargo. On StarWars.com, Soule says it's basically Boba Fett by himself against all of the other people. It's Jabba the Hutt, it's Black Sun, it's Darth Vader, and a whole bunch of others. This begs a more interesting question. Was it really just a year between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi? Even if the conventional answer is true, there's an entire year between these two movies for a ton of Star Wars stories to be explored. And Boba Fett seems to be at the center of it all. Boba Fett trying to keep a hold of Han Solo could in theory be just one part of this era. So you might be wondering, hasn't this happened before? Indeed it has. In 1996, Dark Horse Comics published the Shadows of the Empire miniseries, which depicted, among other things, Boba Fett on the run from other competing bounty hunters. This included IG-88, and they were all trying to rip off his Han Solo cargo. Like the impending War of the Bounty Hunters, the Shadows of the Empire comics were set in the quote-unquote gap year in between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Like the multi-platform project The High Republic, Shadows of the Empire was the biggest 90s Star Wars event prior to the special editions of the classic films. At one point, you could only find Shadows of the Empire toys at toy stores because the entire line effectively replaced regular Star Wars merch for over a year. What I'm trying to say is that the concept of War of the Bounty Hunters is not new. The difference is, of course, that this version could be canon, whereas Shadows of the Empire isn't. Soule doesn't mention Shadows in this interview, but he does name-check Black Sun, the criminal organization that was created for Shadows in the first place. Famously, Boba Fett tells Vader that Han Solo is no good to me dead. But who is paying him specifically? Clearly, Vader hired Boba Fett to track down Solo in Empire, but the Star Wars Special Edition of A New Hope established that Fett was working for Jabba the Hutt way before. Boba Fett is basically guarding Jabba the Hutt in A New Hope, so it's not entirely clear what kind of gig he had at the time. Furthermore, it seems like Boba Fett is just hanging around Jabba's palace chilling out for a full year after the events of Empire. But why? Was Jabba his boss? Did he have any beef with Bib Fortuna at the time? In the Mandalorian Season 2 post-credits scene, we see Boba full-on murder Bib Fortuna. Presumably, he's mad because they all left him for dead in the Sarlacc pit. But is there more to it? Boba's relationship with Jabba the Hutt during the events of Return of the Jedi were pretty murky, which is part of the reason why War of the Bounty Hunters could get very interesting. If Boba Fett was working for Jabba the Hutt full-time, it seems like they could show his alliance to the underworld of Tatooine in the Book of Boba Fett, even though Jabba the Hutt is dead. So basically, in a pretty large way, this new comic from Charles Soule is going to be the precursor to the Book of Boba Fett, and I highly advise that you read it before watching the Book of Boba when it drops on Disney Plus in December. And as I did with The Mandalorian Season 2, I will be doing full breakdowns of every single episode. And so now, my dear friends, we're going to be talking about Pedro Pascal, who reportedly tried to get Gina Carano to change her ways before she was fired. So new reports have confirmed that the Mandalorian star Pedro Pascal was in contact with Carano prior to her firing and quote-unquote tried very hard to get her to change her ways so that she'd be able to keep her job. It's been reported that she just didn't want to listen and carried on with her quote-unquote controversial social media posts. So yeah guys, I think that's the last time I'm going to report on anything to do with Gina Carano on this channel. It's really just exhausting at this point, and that's all that's been in the news to do with Star Wars until this Boba Fett thing. And I think if you genuinely care about Star Wars, you also just want this to be done with, and we can just move on and focus on the upcoming projects that Lucasfilm have in store. I personally can't wait for The Bad Batch and obviously the Book of Boba Fett. We're also getting Star Wars Visions this year, although it's not clear what that is or when it's going to happen. All we know is that it's an anime version of Star Wars. So yeah, let's wait and see. So that is all of the news I have for you guys today. I really hope you enjoyed this one, and if you did, be sure to give me a big fat like, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and also if you're feeling generous, please head over to my Patreon page, where for just $2 or $10 a month, you can get exclusive access to content that's not found here on YouTube. I'm Star Wars Meg, wishing you all a phenomenal rest of the day, no matter where you dwell in the galaxy. Have a good one.